Welcome to Love Lies Chronicles.
I'd love to know what you think. Every comment helps me make the next story better. Subscribe to stay tuned. I didn't realize how bad it had gotten until someone finally asked her about it. By then, everyone at the party had noticed. Everyone except me had seen the pattern. The Morrisons' place was packed that night. Their annual fall gathering, the kind of event Brielle loved. Elegant Victorian home in Guilford, wine flowing. Conversations buzzing through 3 floors of carefully decorated rooms. I'd been to enough of these to know my role. Show up, smile, nod along, try not to take up too much space. But tonight felt different. Every time I spoke, Brielle rolled her eyes. Not subtle little eye rolls either. Full dramatic gestures that made the people around us shift uncomfortably. I'd mention something I'd read. She'd sigh and turn away. I'd contribute to a conversation about the new exhibition at the Baltimore Museum of Art. She'd check her phone. I'd attempt to engage with her coworkers. She'd physically move to put distance between us. I told myself I was imagining it, that I was being too sensitive, that everyone has off nights. Then Amanda Foster, one of Brielle's friends from the gym, asked the question that changed everything. We were standing in the living room. Maybe 8 people in our circle. I'd just finished saying something about the documentary I'd watched, and Brielle had done it again. That eye roll. That dismissive gesture that made me feel like I was wasting everyone's time just by existing. Amanda noticed. She tilted her head, genuinely curious, and asked, "Brielle, why do you do that?" Brielle took a sip of her wine. "Do what?" "Roll your eyes every time Graham talks. You've done it like 5 times tonight." The conversation around us didn't exactly stop, but it quieted. People pretended to be interested in their drinks or the art on the walls, but everyone was listening, waiting. Brielle laughed. Not a nervous laugh. Not an embarrassed laugh. A comfortable, casual laugh like Amanda had asked her about the weather. "Because he's boring." 3 words. Said like they were obvious. Like everyone already knew, and we were all just being polite by not mentioning it. Some of her friends laughed. That uncomfortable sound people make when they don't know what else to do. A few others looked away, suddenly fascinated by the furniture. But Brielle? She just stood there, completely comfortable with what she'd said. I felt something shift inside me. Not anger. Not yet. Just this cold, clear understanding of what had just happened. That's what she thought of me. Not in private, not in a moment of anger. Just as a fact she was comfortable sharing with a room full of people. And from the way her friends reacted, this wasn't the first time she'd said it. They'd heard this before. They'd heard her talk about her boring husband, and they'd nodded along or laughed or maybe even agreed. I stood there holding my drink, and I realized something else. I wasn't boring. I read constantly. I followed current events. I could talk about history, architecture, books, films, local politics. I had interests and opinions and thoughts about the world. But to her, none of that mattered. To her, I was just boring. I finished my drink, set the glass down on the nearest table, looked at Brielle directly. Then I'll bore someone else. I walked toward the door, not running, not storming out, just leaving. Behind me, the room erupted in awkward murmurs. Someone said my name. I didn't turn around. The October air hit me as I stepped outside. Cool, clean, real. I got in my car and sat for a moment, hands on the steering wheel, staring at nothing. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it. I wasn't going home. Not yet. I drove to O'Malley's Pub in Hampton, a neighborhood bar on West 36th Street where nobody knew me and nobody cared. The kind of place where you could sit quietly with a beer and think. The bartender gave me a nod, poured a draft, and left me alone. My phone kept buzzing. I finally pulled it out. 5 texts from Brielle. "Where did you go? This is embarrassing. Everyone's asking where you went. Can you just come back? Graham, seriously." I stared at those messages. Everyone's asking where you went. Not, "I'm worried about you." Not, "We need to talk." Just concern about what people were thinking. About the scene I'd created by having the audacity to leave after being publicly humiliated by my own wife. I typed out a response. "Tell them somewhere interesting. Away from you." I turned my phone to silent and ordered another beer. The bar was half full. A football game played on the TV mounted in the corner. 2 guys argued about a penalty call. A couple sat in a booth, sharing a basket of fries. Normal people having a normal Saturday night. None of them thought I was boring. None of them were rolling their eyes at my existence. I sat there for 2 hours, nursing my beer and thinking about the last year of my marriage. When had it started? When had I gone from being her husband to being the guy she tolerated in front of her friends. When had my contributions to conversations become something to dismiss rather than engage with? I thought about dinner parties where she'd talk over me, about gatherings where she'd redirect conversations away from anything I was interested in, about the way she'd sigh when I started to tell a story, like I was using up her patience just by speaking. I'd adapted, started talking less, participating less, making myself smaller in social settings. Thought maybe if I just found the right balance, the right way to be, she'd see me differently. But that was the problem, wasn't it? She already saw me exactly how she wanted to see me, and no amount of trying was going to change that. By 11, I'd made a decision. I pulled out my phone and booked a room at the Hotel Indigo downtown, a place to sleep that wasn't our townhouse in Roland Park, a place where I could think without her presence filling every corner. I texted her once, "Staying somewhere else tonight. We'll talk tomorrow." She called immediately. I let it go to voicemail. She called 3 more times. I turned my phone off. The hotel room was generic but clean. King bed, desk, window overlooking the city. I lay on top of the covers, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. My mind kept replaying the evening. Not just tonight, but months of evenings. Parties and dinners and gatherings where I'd felt increasingly like a guest in my own marriage. The thing about patterns is you don't see them when you're inside them. You make excuses. She's tired. She's stressed. She's had a long week. But lying there at 2 in the morning, I couldn't unsee it anymore. Every party, every dinner, every gathering, she was engaged, animated, fully present with everyone except me. With me, she was tolerating, managing, waiting for me to stop existing so loudly. How long had I been apologizing for taking up space? I finally fell asleep around 4 in the morning. Woke up at 7 to sunlight streaming through the hotel curtains. For a moment, I forgot where I was. Then it all came back. I ordered room service, coffee and toast, sat by the window watching the city wake up below me. People heading to Sunday brunch, couples walking dogs, everyone going about their normal lives while mine was falling apart. Except it didn't feel like falling apart. It felt like waking up. I thought about calling my brother, but what would I say? My wife called me boring in front of everyone, so I left? It sounded petty when I put it that way, but it wasn't petty. It was about respect. About spending years trying to be enough for someone who'd already decided I wasn't. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through old photos. Brielle and me at our wedding. Smiling, happy, hopeful. Brielle and me at parties. Me standing slightly behind her, always in the background. Brielle with her friends, animated and bright. Brielle and me at dinner, her looking at her phone while I looked at the menu. When had I become invisible to her? By morning, something inside me had solidified. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done. I left the hotel around 9 and drove to Druid Hill Park. Needed to walk. Needed to move. The park was quiet on Sunday morning, just a few joggers and dog walkers. The fall leaves crunched under my feet as I walked the paths, thinking through everything I needed to do. We rented the townhouse together. Lease was in both our names, ended in 3 months. I could find my own place easily. Bank accounts were separate. We'd never fully merged our finances, something that had seemed practical at the time, but now felt like preparation for exactly this moment. We'd been married 2 years. Together for 4. No kids. No major shared assets. Just a lease and some furniture and a marriage that had died so quietly I hadn't noticed until someone asked my wife why she kept rolling her eyes at me. By 10 in the morning, I was standing outside our townhouse, keys in hand. Her car was in the driveway. I went inside as quietly as I could, grabbed a bag from the closet, and started packing. Clothes, laptop, important documents, the things I'd need for the next few weeks. I could hear her moving around upstairs, the shower running. Her morning routine, same as always. Like last night hadn't happened. Like nothing had changed. I was almost finished packing when I heard her footsteps on the stairs. I left a note on the kitchen counter. Staying somewhere else for a few days. We need to talk, but not yet. I was in my car before she made it downstairs. My phone rang at 11. I answered. Are you seriously doing this? Brielle's voice was sharp. Over a joke? Was it a joke? I kept my voice level. Oh my God, you're being so sensitive. I was tipsy, everyone was laughing. Everyone was uncomfortable. There's a difference. So what? You're going to pout at a hotel? I'm going to think about whether I want to stay married to someone who finds me boring. Silence. Then, I didn't mean it like that. You meant it exactly like that. You've been saying it for months, haven't you? To your friends. Maybe to yourself. Last night was just the first time I heard it. This is ridiculous. Just come home. I'll come get more of my things this week. We'll talk when I'm ready. Graham. I hung up. She called back immediately. I didn't answer. Over the next week, I went back to the townhouse 3 times when she was at work. Each time, I took more of my belongings. Books, clothes, the painting my brother had given me that had somehow ended up in the spare room instead of on display. The coffee maker I'd bought. My half of the kitchen supplies. She texted constantly. Are we really not going to talk about this? This is childish. Fine. Whatever. Can we please just talk? I responded once. Saturday. Artifact Coffee. 10 a.m. I spent that week apartment hunting. Found a 1-bedroom in Remington, a neighborhood I'd always liked. Younger, more artistic, full of the kind of coffee shops and bookstores I actually enjoyed. Signed a lease. Arranged for the utilities to be in my name. Set up automatic payments for my half of the townhouse bills through the end of our lease. I also called a lawyer. Not for divorce papers, not yet. Maryland required a 12-month separation before you could file for divorce anyway. But I wanted to know my options. Wanted to understand what I'd need to do to make this clean. The lawyer was practical. No kids, limited shared assets, both of us employed. It would be straightforward. We'd need to separate our lives for a year, then file the paperwork. Simple. Clinical. Done. By the time Saturday came, I'd already moved half my things to the new apartment. I arrived at Artifact Coffee in Woodbury 15 minutes early, chose a table near the window, and ordered an Americano. The place was busy with the weekend morning crowd. The espresso machine hissed and steamed. People talked and laughed and went about their normal Saturday mornings. Brielle arrived 10 minutes late, looking like she'd put effort into her appearance. Hair done, makeup perfect, the version of herself she showed to the world. She sat down across from me. Okay, you've made your point. You've been dramatic enough. Can we move past this? This isn't drama. This is me deciding I deserve better. Better than what? I made one comment. You made one comment out loud that I happened to hear. How many times have you said it when I wasn't there? She looked away. That was answer enough. That's what I thought. I took a sip of my coffee. Look, maybe you've been stressed. Maybe you've been thoughtless. But leaving? Over this? It's not just the comment. It's the eye rolling. It's how you talk over me. It's how you redirect conversations away from anything I'm interested in. It's how you've spent 2 years making me feel like I'm an inconvenience you tolerate. That's not fair, isn't it? When's the last time you listened to me talk about something I care about without sighing or checking your phone? She didn't have an answer. I leaned forward slightly. I'm moving out. I've already found a place. I'll have everything out by the end of the month. Her eyes widened. You're leaving? Actually leaving? I'm not boring, Brielle. You just find me boring. And I'm not going to spend the rest of my life trying to be interesting enough for my own wife. Graham, come on. We can work on this. We can go to counseling, or I don't want to work on this. I don't want to go to counseling. I want to be with someone who doesn't have to try to respect me. Someone who doesn't roll their eyes when I speak. Someone who actually wants to hear what I have to say. She reached across the table. I pulled my hand back. This is really it? Her voice cracked slightly. You're just giving up? I'm not giving up. I'm choosing self-respect. I stood, left a $10 bill on the table for my coffee, looked at her one more time. Take care of yourself. I walked out. Behind me, I heard her call my name. I didn't turn around. Over the next 2 weeks, I moved the rest of my things out. Brielle tried several times to talk me out of it. Each conversation went the same way. She'd start defensive, then move to bargaining, then to anger. But she never once genuinely apologized. Never once seemed to understand that calling your husband boring in front of a room full of people wasn't something you could just smooth over. The last time I was at the townhouse, she stood in the doorway watching me load the final boxes into my car. So that's it, she asked. You're just giving up on us? I'm not giving up. I'm choosing self-respect. That's not fair. Neither was being called boring in front of all our friends. I closed the trunk, looked at the townhouse one more time. It had never really felt like mine anyway. Always decorated to her taste. Always run on her schedule. I'd been a guest there, a tolerated presence. I got in my car and drove away. That evening, I finally called my brother, Connor. He lived in Philadelphia, worked in finance, and had always been direct with me. If anyone would tell me I was overreacting, it would be him. He answered on the second ring. Hey, stranger. What's up? Brielle and I are separating. Silence. Then what happened? I told him everything. The party, the eye rolls, the comment, walking out, the hotel, the week of packing, the conversation at the coffee shop. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Graham, he finally said, I need to tell you something. And you're probably not going to like it. What? I never liked how she talked about you. I sat down on my couch. What do you mean? At family gatherings. At your wedding. Whenever you weren't in the room, she'd make these little comments. Like you were this project she was working on. Like you needed improving. I thought maybe it was just how she talked, you know? Some people are like that with their partners. But it always bothered me. Why didn't you say anything? Because you seemed happy. And who am I to judge someone else's marriage? But man, I'm not surprised she said that at a party. I'm surprised she didn't say worse. I felt something heavy settle in my chest. You think I'm doing the right thing? I think you should have done it a year ago. We talked for another hour. About relationships and respect and knowing your worth. About how sometimes the people closest to us see things we're too close to notice. By the time we hung up, I felt more certain than ever that I'd made the right choice. I got in my car and drove away. The apartment in Remington was quiet. Empty. Mine. I spent the first evening arranging furniture, hanging pictures, setting up my space the way I wanted it. No compromises. No asking if she liked where I'd put the bookshelf. Just my choices, my preferences, my life. I ordered pizza from a place down the street. Ate it sitting on the floor because I didn't have a dining table yet. Put on music I liked without worrying if it was too loud or the wrong genre. Stayed up until midnight reading because I could. Around 1 in the morning, I stood at my bedroom window looking out at the neighborhood. Streetlights cast long shadows. A few people walked by, heading home from bars or restaurants. The city felt alive in a way our townhouse never had. I realized I was smiling. When was the last time I'd smiled alone in my own home? I couldn't remember. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was taking up too much space. Brielle texted a few more times over the following weeks. I think you're making a huge mistake. You're really going to throw away our marriage? I hope you're happy. I didn't respond. Through Drew and Melissa, the couple friends we'd had, I heard bits and pieces about how she was handling things. Initially, she was telling people I'd overreacted to a joke, that I was being overly sensitive, that she didn't understand why I'd left. But slowly, the story changed. People had been at that party. They'd seen her roll her eyes. They'd heard her call me boring. Amanda Foster, the friend who'd asked the question, had apparently told several people what happened. The narrative Brielle was trying to create wasn't holding up. By December, Melissa mentioned that Brielle was struggling. The townhouse was expensive to carry alone. She was looking for a roommate or considering moving to a cheaper place. The social gatherings she loved so much had become awkward. People didn't know whose side to take, so they took neither. They just stopped inviting her to things. I felt no satisfaction in hearing this. No vindication. Just a quiet acknowledgement that actions have consequences. One afternoon in late January, I almost ran into her. I was at the Whole Foods in Harbor East, picking up groceries for the week. I turned down the produce aisle and saw her at the other end, examining avocados. My first instinct was to turn around, to avoid the confrontation. But then I realized something. I didn't need to avoid her. I wasn't afraid of her. I just didn't want to talk to her. I continued shopping. Picked up tomatoes, lettuce, some apples. Moved methodically through my list. She looked up at one point, saw me, and froze. I nodded once. A polite acknowledgement, the kind you'd give a stranger. Then I moved on to the next aisle. She didn't follow. Didn't try to talk to me. I finished my shopping, paid, and left. In the parking lot, I sat in my car for a moment. Waited to feel something. Anger. Sadness. Regret. Anything. Nothing came. She'd become a stranger. Someone I used to know. Someone who used to matter. The most remarkable thing about that moment was how unremarkable it felt. I also heard that she was still telling people she didn't really understand why I'd left. That we'd had problems, sure, but nothing that couldn't have been fixed. That I'd just given up without really trying. Drew told me this over coffee one afternoon. We'd stayed in touch, one of the few friendships that survived the split. A few weeks after that conversation, I found myself back at O'Malley's. Not because I was sad or angry or needed to think. Just because I wanted a beer and liked the atmosphere. The same bartender was working. He recognized me, gave me a nod, poured my usual without asking. Haven't seen you in a while, he said. Been busy. Good busy or bad busy? Good busy. He smiled. That's the best kind. I sat there for an hour, watching the same football game I'd watched the night Brielle called me boring. But this time, I wasn't processing anything. Wasn't working through emotions. Wasn't making decisions about my future. I was just a guy at a bar on a Thursday evening, having a beer, enjoying the game. That's when I knew I'd really moved on. When the place that had been my refuge became just a place I liked to go. She finally said maybe she shouldn't have said that in front of everyone, he mentioned. Not that she shouldn't have thought it, just that she shouldn't have said it out loud. I nodded. That told me everything I needed to know. 3 months after I walked out of that party, I was sitting in my favorite coffee shop on a Sunday morning. Before that Sunday, though, there was a Thursday evening that changed how I saw myself. The book club met in the community room at the Enoch Pratt Free Library. 12 people, ranging from their 20s to their 60s. We were discussing a novel about urban development and gentrification. I'd read it twice, made notes, had thoughts I wanted to share. The old me would have held back, would have waited for the perfect moment, would have worried about taking up too much time or saying something people might find boring. But I wasn't that person anymore. I spoke up early, talked about the author's use of architecture as metaphor, how the physical transformation of neighborhoods mirrored the emotional transformation of the characters. I was passionate about it. Spoke for maybe 3 minutes. When I finished, a woman named Claire across from me leaned forward. That's brilliant, she said. I didn't even notice that pattern, but you're absolutely right. The buildings are characters themselves. Others jumped in. Agreed. Disagreed, thoughtfully. Built on my observation. Asked follow-up questions. We spent 20 minutes on that thread alone, diving deep into the text, challenging each other, learning from each other. Nobody rolled their eyes. Nobody sighed. Nobody checked their phone while I was talking. At the end of the meeting, 3 different people thanked me for my insights. Claire asked if I wanted to grab coffee before the next meeting to discuss the new book we'd be reading. I walked back to my car feeling 10 feet tall. This was what conversation was supposed to feel like. This was what respect looked like. 3 months after I walked out of that party, I was sitting in my favorite coffee shop on a Sunday morning. It was a small place in Remington, locally owned, the kind of spot where the baristas knew my order. I had the paper spread out in front of me and a book on the chair next to me. My life had changed. I joined a book club through the local library. The people there actually engaged with what I said. Asked follow-up questions. Disagreed sometimes, sure, but thoughtfully. With respect. I'd started hiking on weekends with a group I'd found online. Good people who shared my interest in getting outdoors. The first hike I went on was in Patapsco Valley State Park. I showed up early, nervous about meeting new people. About whether I'd fit in. About whether I'd be boring here too. A guy named Marcus introduced himself first. Then Jennifer. Then a whole group of people whose names I tried to remember. We set off on the trail, and within minutes, I was deep in conversation with Marcus about the best trails in Maryland. With Jennifer about a book we'd both read. With another woman about the history of the park itself. At one point, we stopped at a viewpoint overlooking the river. I mentioned something about the geological formations, how the valley had been carved out over thousands of years. I was talking, realized I was talking a lot, and started to trail off. Don't stop, Jennifer said. That's fascinating. How do you know all this? I just read a lot. Well, keep reading, Marcus said. And keep sharing. This is way better than my usual hikes where we just complain about work the whole time. Everyone laughed, including me. We hiked for 3 hours that day. At the end, 5 people asked when I was coming on the next hike. 2 people exchanged numbers with me to send trail recommendations. I drove home tired, muddy, and happier than I'd been in months. I'd reconnected with old friends I'd lost touch with. Friends who enjoyed my company, who laughed at my jokes, who asked my opinion on things and actually wanted to hear the answer. My friend Trevor was one of them. We'd known each other in college, lost touch over the years. When I reached out after the separation, we picked up like no time had passed. One evening, he called me about a problem he was having at work. A presentation he had to give. He was nervous, didn't know if his ideas were good enough, kept second-guessing himself. I listened. Then I said, "Your ideas are solid. You're just afraid of taking up space in that room." Silence. Then, "How did you know?" "Because I spent 2 years apologizing for existing. Trust me, I know what it looks like." We talked for an hour. About confidence and respect and knowing your worth. About how the right people will want to hear what you have to say. About how if someone makes you feel like you're too much, you're probably with the wrong someone. At the end of the call, he said, "I'm glad you're my friend again. I forgot how good you are at this stuff." That meant more to me than he probably knew. I'd even started dating casually. Nothing serious yet. Just coffee dates and walks around the harbor. Conversations with people who seemed interested in getting to know me. It was strange at first, being valued instead of tolerated. But I was getting used to it. One date in particular stood out. Her name was Rachel. We'd matched on an app, agreed to meet for coffee at a place in Federal Hill. I'd been nervous, the way you are when you haven't dated in years. She asked what I did for fun. I told her about the book club, the hiking group, my interest in local history and architecture. I talked about a walking tour I'd taken of historic Baltimore neighborhoods. About the documentary I'd watched about urban planning. I caught myself rambling and stopped. "Sorry, I'm talking too much." She looked confused. "Why are you sorry? This is interesting. Tell me more about the architecture tour." So I did. And she listened, asked questions, shared her own interests. We talked for 2 hours. When we finally left, she said, "I'd really like to see you again." I went home that night and realized something. I'd apologized for talking, for being enthusiastic about things I cared about, for taking up space in a conversation. That was Brielle's voice in my head, not mine. I was done listening to it. A woman at the next table asked me about the book I had with me, A History of Baltimore Architecture. We ended up talking for 20 minutes about historic preservation, about the neighborhoods we loved, about our favorite buildings in the city. She was engaged, smiling, actually interested. We exchanged numbers. As I walked back to my apartment afterward, I thought about that night at the Morrisons, about standing in that room while my wife told everyone I was boring, about the cold clarity that had hit me in that moment. I thought about how I'd spent years making myself smaller, quieter, less, trying to find the right way to be so she'd see me differently. But the problem was never me. Some people think closure requires an apology, a moment where the other person finally understands what they did wrong. But I learned that night, when I finished my drink and walked out, that sometimes closure is just knowing your worth and refusing to settle for less. Brielle never understood that she didn't find me boring because I was boring. She found me boring because she'd stopped respecting me. Maybe she'd never really respected me at all. And once I saw that clearly, the decision was simple. I didn't need her to see my value. I just needed to see it myself. The rest took care of itself. Now, on Sunday mornings, I wake up without dread. I read my paper at my favorite coffee shop. I talk to people who actually want to hear what I have to say. I live in a space that's mine, filled with things I chose, organized the way I like it. The silence isn't lonely. It's comfortable. I'm not angry anymore. Not hurt. Not wondering what I could have done differently. I'm just grateful. Grateful for Amanda Foster asking that question. Grateful for the clarity that came from hearing the truth spoken out loud. Grateful for having enough self-respect to walk away from someone who couldn't see what she had. I heard recently that Brielle moved to a smaller apartment with a roommate, that she's still going to parties and social events, still telling people I couldn't handle her sense of humor, still convinced the problem was me. I hope she's happy. I genuinely do. But mostly, I just don't think about her anymore, because I'm too busy living a life where I'm not boring, where I'm valued, where I take up exactly as much space as I deserve to take up, where rolling my eyes at someone's contribution to a conversation would be considered rude, not funny. Turns out I'm not boring at all. I was just boring to the wrong person. And walking away from someone who couldn't see my value was the most interesting decision I ever made. Dear listeners, that's our ending. If it resonated, subscribe to support the channel. See you next time.